To be honest, an AI-powered webcam was not something I had on my to-buy list as a musician, like, ever. But when OBSBOT reached out to me to see if I was interested in reviewing their new camera, the Tiny SE, I immediately saw how if this thing does what it says it does, it could be a killer tool and essential for a lot of musicians. So let's talk about why. The Tiny SE is an AI-powered PTZ camera, which means it can pan, tilt, and zoom automatically based on how you set it up. This can come in handy if you're doing remote work for a client, or streaming to an audience, or even making content around your music, as it can follow you as you move around your studio. I'm thinking about the way that I have my room set up, where I have a guitar amp over here, keys right here, and then drums back there. The promise that this camera will follow me wherever I go in the studio makes it to where the audience, no matter who that is, can have a more connected and immersive experience. The Tiny SE claims to deliver 1080p video resolution at an impressive 100 frames per second, which I cannot imagine I would ever use, but it's still pretty impressive. It features an f1.8 aperture as well as combining two native ISOs, which basically means that it does really well in low light as more light can get into the camera. You can have presets for camera settings or camera angles on this. You can set zones for where you want it to follow you and where you don't want it to follow you. But where the AI comes in is the various tracking modes. If you want a wide angle that kind of pans around the room as you move, you can do that. If you want it to stay a bit closer to your face and kind of zoom in as you're backing up and moving around the room, it'll also do that. What's really cool is you can choose between different tracking modes like group or upper body or lower body. There's even a hand mode, which I think could be really cool for if you're playing an instrument like piano or guitar and you want it to just follow your hands, it could do that. And you can also use hand gestures to control things like turning tracking on and off or zooming in and out, which can be really cool and keep you from having to run back and forth in the middle of a session. Tiny SE is really easy to set up. I honestly wasn't sure what setup would look like or if I'd have to configure or balance this thing. It plugs in via USB and is instantly recognized as a webcam. From there, I downloaded the OBSBOT Center software, which I use to update the firmware as well as control the Tiny SE. And as far as where you can actually put this camera, it seems that you have 3 different mounting options, which is a pretty underrated feature in my opinion. You can just set it on your desk, or you can open up the base and sort of clamp it onto your monitor. But it also features threads underneath so that you can mount it to a tripod or something like that. It's worth mentioning here that you can set this up in landscape, portrait, or even upside down shooting as well. I've had some time to really test out the Tiny SE in a music making context, so I do want to give my honest opinions on that based around that context. But first I want to show you some actual examples of how this could be used in your studio. For this first scenario, let's do giving a guitar lesson. I'll probably start out the lesson by greeting the student and checking in on our progress from the past week. And then as we're fixing to start, I can just walk over here and grab the old Taylor so that we can get to work. And there's not a disconnect whenever I get up and move. I'm not walking out of frame. And when I want the student to actually see what I'm doing on the guitar, I'll probably set it to the hand tracking mode. So I'll make sure it can see my hand here. And then from there, it'll just follow me. Even if I happen to move this way, make sure that it can see me pretty well. I can zoom in. And that's that. And if I happen to be doing anything with the pedal board or amp, I can just hit my preset. That will move over to the amp, and that will stay there and not move around so that you can see what switches I'm hitting and stuff like that. This could also be really useful if I'm performing over a live stream. So maybe I start out by laying down a track on the drums, and then I can just walk over here to the keys as that's playing. And once it gets to the loop point, I can just, or, something like that. And then walk over to the electric. And ideally, I would probably already have this hooked up and start noodling away there. This way of doing things, in my opinion, is just a lot less complicated than having different camera angles that you're going to have to edit in post. And if you're having to manage that during a stream, that's even more complicated if you're on your own. Now, I don't want to go too far without addressing some potential concerns that someone might have with a product like this. Firstly, I've already been seeing some people online talk about how this camera has 1080p resolution and not 4K, which, in my opinion, is not a big concern for a product like this. If you're doing a music lesson or you're meeting remotely with a client, you really don't need 4K resolution for that. And if you're live streaming using the Tiny SE, your viewers are really just there to watch and listen to you make music or engage with them in some way, and 1080p is great for that. And even if you're using this for recording online content, a lot of people are probably going to be watching that content on their little phone or their 1080p computer monitor or TV, so don't overthink it. If for some reason the video resolution is a deal breaker for you, but you're interested in all the other features, OBSBOT does have a range of 4K cameras like this as well. Also, inevitably some people are going to be wondering about privacy when it comes to an AI powered camera or something of the sort. After doing some research, it does seem like they've gone out of their way to make sure that your privacy is protected when using their devices. One notable thing that I appreciate about the Tiny SE is that it literally has a sleep mode where it turns straight down where it can't see anything. So you can click the sleep button in the software, or you can just reach your hand up and turn the camera down and it will put itself to sleep that way. You can also set up like a sleep timer so that after a certain amount of time without using it, it'll just shut off by itself. Those were the main things I could think of, but if you have any more concerns or questions about the Tiny SE, let me know down in the comments below. Now I want to get into my honest thoughts of the Tiny SE, as well as how it worked for me as a musician and whether or not this is something that you should buy for yourself. First of all, the tracking, auto zoom, and preset stuff I found super cool and way more useful than I initially thought it would be. However, as a musician who wears a lot of hats and does a lot of things, I personally found 3 presets to be a bit limiting. I don't know if that's something that could be implemented in a future software update or something like that, but more preset slots would allow me to set up more angles, presets for tracking modes, and stuff like that. Also, I appreciate all of the color settings on a device like this. If you're doing simple stuff and don't want to spend the time dialing it in, you may want to just keep everything fully auto, but if you want to set this stuff up manually so that it's not shifting around as far as colors and exposure, you're able to do that as well as set presets for those things if you have enough slots. Also, after getting a Stream Deck Mini recently, I was pleasantly surprised that OBSBOT has a plugin for the Stream Deck on the Elgato marketplace. So I can control the Tiny SE and select presets from the Stream Deck, which makes it a lot easier for me. So, should you get the OBSBOT Tiny SE? Honestly, I'm not gonna sit here and say, yeah, everyone needs a camera like this. There's some people who make music and never plan on streaming and only do remote sessions, and for that I would say maybe something like this would be a bit overkill. But I would also say that for those people who are either working with clients remotely or streaming, even making social media content, I really believe that 99 USD is a killer value for something with the amount of features and the video quality you get out of the Tiny SE. It's one of those things where, yeah, you can set up your phone and have a static shot and that'll do the trick. But if you think something like this might be beneficial in your studio, I think this is a great deal. If you want to check out the Tiny SE for yourself, there's a link in the description that'll take you there. Also, if you got any value out of this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more like this. As always, thanks for hanging out.